everything you know about the game.
Ha Joon's gotten pretty popular with Squid Game, and he's also shown some pretty nice English skills to boot. By the way, no spoilers in this. My wife and I are slowly making our way through the series. But one of the things I really started kind of asking myself was, if Ha Jun was one of my pronunciation students, what would I tell him? And listening to him talk, it really did hit me that he's doing a lot of the same things that many of my pronunciation students are doing. Stresses that are a little bit weaker or not standing out, not having reductions in his speech, having speech that sounds a little bit flat, like if you feel like almost like a robot, like
everything's kind of about at the same
pitch level, nothing's going really high, nothing's going really low, everything's kind of around this midpoint and it never really breaks. Now, this is not a critique of what he is doing. I think his speech is very clear. It's understandable. He conveys what he needs to convey. But for many of my students, these goals aren't their goals. For many of my students, the goals are they want to sound supernatural. They're perfectionists. They want to be seen almost as the same way as native speakers are. So if I had a student that talked like this and they had some of these extremely high goals, what would we do? Well, before we did anything, I wanted to find some models of Native American English speakers saying a very similar phrase.
Tell me everything you know.
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 So just listening to the native speakers talk, some things I'm already noticing is that, let's start off with stresses. The most commonly stressed words I'm hearing are on tell, or no, or everything. I think the other words are more likely to get reduced. And keep in mind too that there is some variation. Some of the native speakers will just stress tell, some of the native speakers will stress everything. It's not usual that every single one of those words will get stressed. In addition to that too, these are the stressed words, so that I'm expecting a couple things, right? They're the words that have the highest pitch, and they're also the words that are held the longest as well, which is what you would expect. In addition to stress, there's also a lot of reductions going on too. Like we mentioned earlier, for instance, like you is often becoming like yeah, like tell me everything you know, or tell me everything you know. It's like it's the difference between you know and you know.
Tell me everything you know.
All right, so now that we've heard all of those examples from native speakers, let's compare it to the original one more time.
Tell me everything you know about the game. Tell me everything you know.
Tell me everything you know.
Tell me everything you know.
Well, for starters, the stresses in Ha Jun's speech tend to be a little bit less exaggerated. They take a little bit more work to identify because the pitches aren't going super high. Additionally, there aren't as many reductions. So for instance, reductions are cases where like a word like you may become yeah. The other thing too, which is also related a little bit to stress, is that the pitches again are kind of flat. Everything again is kind of staying around this midpoint, never really going much higher, never really going much lower. And again, one of the things we're always talking about is that to sound the most natural in American English,
you want to have lots of contrast.
Lots of highs.
Lots of lows.
Constantly moving in between them. So with all of these things in mind, I wanted to play around a little bit with the audio file. Now, as you can see, this is the original audio file of his voice. I haven't made any changes to it in this version right here. But then you can see in these other ones, there's lots of like cutoffs. Some things are longer, some things are shorter. So just to kind of let you know what I was thinking. So one of the first things I did was I tried to raise or lower the pitch, either by speeding up or slowing down a file or providing some voice modification, to give you some examples of that.
Tell me.
Similar to that point, some of this is just to either speed up the sound in the case of especially reductions, or to slow down the sound, again in the case of stresses.
Tell me everything. Tell me everything. Tell me everything. Tell me everything.
And just a minor note too, like that was somewhat contradictory in the program, right? So if I need a word to be stressed, I need to have a higher pitch, but I also want to have it take up more time. And if you slow something down, that's going to lower the pitch. So I really had to play around with modifying the pitches to be at about the right speed, but also to have that right pitch level.
Tell me everything you know about the game. Tell me everything you know about the game.
Tell me everything you know.
Tell me everything you know.
Now this is not perfect, right? I can only work so much with the original file. I can't change things like intonation, where like you would rise or fall. Those things are a little bit harder to modify in the programs that I have. Additionally, I'm really chopping things up, right? So sometimes when I'm pasting everything back together, you get kind of these little cuts and pops and things like that. So it's not going to be the smoothest. However, one thing that I think I did achieve was that I think I added some stresses, or at least added some emotion to those stresses, because we were able to change the pitch. We also played around with the length, right? So our stressed words could take up more space, more time. So in general, I think the rhythms that you can identify in the modifications I made sound a little bit more natural than the original. But let me know what you think. Did I do good? Did I do horrible? Is this all ridiculous? Let me know in the comments. By the way, too, if you enjoy seeing corrections like this, you may enjoy this whole playlist of videos where I give feedback to English language learners.